All, thanks to VSI and Fisher for giving this opportunity to present in the seminar. Today I'll be speaking about radiation safety. I'm Dr. Adarsh Kumar. I'm a final year resident at Bangalore Ramaya Medical College Hospital. So, first, before going into the topic, I just want you to know about who these persons are. The first one is Madam Marie Curie. So she's considered to be a pioneer in radioactivity. The second one is Thomas Alva Edison. Why I have put up these pictures in this presentation in particular? Madam Marie Curie, as you all know, she finally died because of aplastic anemia. And almost all the family members, her daughter and their son-in-law, everyone, they finally succumbed due to various reasons that is associated with radiation exposure and its hazards. The second picture, Thomas Alva Edison, we know him famously for his inventions. His one of the discoveries, the fluoroscopic equipment, which is recently being used. In that, because of excessive radiation experiments, his wife and in fact some of his co-workers, they succumbed to radiation exposure. So he's been even quoted saying, "Don't talk to me about X-rays. I'm afraid of X-rays." Just with this brief note, going into the topic per se. Introduction: radiation is being increasingly used for diagnostic and therapeutic purposes, and it is hazardous both to the patient and to the operator, especially during any major therapeutic procedures. And appropriate education has to be given about radiation safety, both to the operating surgeon and the personnel standing inside the OT. Concern of radiation safety, it is being increasing in our field, especially with the advent of this endovascular era in recent times. So hazards of radiation, what can be expected? There can be brain tumors, there can be microvascular or macrovascular complications, there can be thyroid disease, or it can turn up in malignancies like breast malignancies, or they can have affect eyes in form of cataracts. So going into the types of radiation, radiation is nothing but a form of energy that is emitted as an electromagnetic waves or particles. It can be either ionizing or non-ionizing. So what is the difference between the both? Ionizing, they have the potential to knock off electrons from an atom, and thereby they can produce a biologic injury. So examples of ionizing radiations are X-rays, gamma rays, and beta rays. And the other group is the non-ionizing radiation, which comprises of ultrasound, MRI, lasers, and microwaves. They don't have the energy to ionize the atoms. Measurement, these are usually the radioactivity is the amount of ionization that the radiation produces in the air. It is measured as Röntgen, and but it won't accurately reflect the potential of the substance to cause biologic injury. This picture shows an X-ray, which is considered to be a photon that knocks off the electron and brings about DNA damage. So the biologic effect that the radiation produces, it depends upon the amount of radiation, the sensitivity of the organ getting the radiation, and the actual strength of the radiation. Quantification of radiation, it is quantified in three terms mainly: absorbed dose, equivalent dose, and effective dose. We'll be seeing this. Absorbed dose is the measurement of amount of energy deposited in the medium by ionizing radiation per unit mass of that matter. It is usually measured in grays. SI unit is gray, and the earlier term used was radiation absorbed dose, RAD. And then the next one is the equivalent dose. Here they take into consideration the radiation weighting factor, that is the WR. It is the measurement of radiation dose to the tissue, and also takes into consideration the different types of radiation. And it is this WR constant is actually different for different radiations. It is 1 for gamma rays and X-rays. It is 3 to 10 for proton and neutrons. This SI unit, it is measured by Sieverts, and older term that was used for this equivalent dose was Röntgen equivalent man. In almost all our vascular surgical interventions, we can roughly consider that both the absorbed dose and the equivalent dose are similar. So the Sieverts and Gray are roughly equal. The third one is the effective dose. This one, they take into consideration the weighting factor, the one more weighting factor, that is the WT. This takes into account the part of the body that is irradiated and the volume and type of the radiation that is exposed also. So in order to avoid confusion between this WR and WT constants, they have commonly merged it as W constant. So this takes into consideration, along with the radiation exposure, the amount of tissue and the quantity of tissue that takes the radiation also. Usually in medical field, commonly the radiation is measured in terms of milligrays or millisieverts. So this is just in summary. Radioactivity is measured in Curie. Ionizing radiation, they are measured in Röntgen. And observed dose, it is usually measured in gray. 1 gray is equal to 100 rads that is used earlier, and both equivalent and effective dose, as I told earlier, is now like considered merge. WT and WR considered merge, and they term it as W. So this 1 sievert is equal to gray into W. That is in older terms, it is around 100 rems. Coming to the biologic effects of radiation. So what if radiation gets reaches the cell? The cell can either repair themselves, it can die, or it can undergo a mutation. So the effects of biologic tissue happens is just told as a deterministic effect, or it can be a stochastic effect. We'll be seeing that. The first one is the deterministic effect. What is deterministic effect? It is directly dose dependent. Higher the dose, more the injury, and this is directly correlated with the cell death. And it impairs the hair follicles, skin, subcutaneous tissue, and lens. Skin erythema and skin burns are common examples of deterministic effect. The threshold here exists, but it varies amongst different individuals. Larger doses causes more deterministic effect, and symptoms starts once a significant amount of that cell gets killed and the inflammatory process begins. So ideally, a single time dose of 10 to 20 grays is considered as fatal at a deterministic effect. Around 0.5 to 1 sieverts can produce a light radiation sickness. Around 1 sievert, it can cause slight blood changes. Around 2 to 3 sieverts, it can cause nausea and small hair loss damages. Whereas an acute dose of 3 sieverts, it is said that there will be death in almost 50% of cases within a period of 1 month. So this is about deterministic effect, which is an acute effect. The second one is the stochastic effect, which is also called as probabilistic effect. This is like a cumulative effect. Here, DNA damage happens to the cells. There occurs mutations, and then there can be either cancers or genetic defects. Earlier days, they used to worry more about the genetic defects, but the actual worrying part about the stochastic effect is their malignant potential. It is like an all or none phenomenon. There is no threshold level for radiation. The probability increases as the cumulative radiation dose just keeps on increasing, and the severity is independent of the dose. Theoretically, with doses less than 100 millisieverts per year, the probabilistic effect chances are very low. So, as I told, the type of cancer which is going to get is independent of the type of radiation. There can be various cancers like leukemia and other cancers like lungs, breast, and thyroid. Latent period varies between different cancers between the exposure and the malignancy. Usually, it is 2 to 3 years for leukemia, 5 years for thyroid, and more than 10 years for other malignancies. But there is no specific set. Like it can even be a decade. Like we are even seeing malignancy coming up in the survivors of Hiroshima, Nagasaki bomb atomic explosion. So there is no specific criteria like when the malignancy is going to be manifested in these patients, and probability of getting a fatal cancer is around 4% per 1 sieverts of lifetime dose equivalence in these patients. This is a summary just telling that threshold levels. Usually a deterministic effect, that is permanent sterility will be there when there is 3 to 6 sieverts exposure in gonads, and eye, usually cataracts can occur when there is a single deterministic dose of around 0.5 sieverts at a time, and other skin changes like erythema can begin even at 2 sieverts exposure, whereas necrosis and all starts with the higher dose around 25 sieverts single time exposure. And usually the patients, they are subjected to various diagnostic modalities, and at that time they can be exposed to, they are having high chances of malignant potential. Examples like when they are going for treatment of acne or tonsillitis radiation, they are more prone for getting thyroid malignancies. In going for a postpartum mastitis radiation management, they have more chance of getting breast malignancies. And likewise, depending upon the radiation areas exposed, there are chances of getting the malignancies. This is about the effects of the radiation as such that is being done during diagnostic and intervention procedures. Apart from this, there are also certain background exposure, that is, humans are constantly exposed to these radiations because of radioactive materials, cosmic radiations. Average in US, they say it is around 3 millisieverts per year radiation exposure is there, background exposure. Greatest source of domestic radiation, it comes from the radon gas that is produced by the decay of the radium. It is in fact said to be the second most common cause of lung cancer after cigarette smoking. Apart from this, various domestic appliances like televisions, fuels, and smoke detectors are also told to cause domestic radiation. So the radiation, it varies from different areas. It increases with altitude and it is strongest at the poles. They say pilots who are exposed to solar radiation are in fact at a higher risk. So this is the background exposure, natural background exposure. As you have seen, it is around 3 millisieverts per year. For a physician who is working in laboratory, it is around 2 to 60 millisieverts per year. And whereas for an assistant laboratory nurse, it is around 8 to 16 millisieverts per year is the occupational exposure. This is the occupational exposure. The second one, it gives the various investigations and then the various the effective doses that is exposed, that the person gets exposed following these examinations. For a simple chest radiograph, the PA radiograph, it is around 0.02 millisieverts is obtained, whereas it is almost 200 times of this for a fluoroscopic examination. So that much dose a patient gets exposed during a fluoroscopy. Principles of coming to radiation protection, their principles, ICRP, they give a set of principles for protection in medical practice. They stress the fundamental principles of justification. They give the optimization, how to protect, and then the risk limits. So use of radiation always has to be justified. It has to produce more benefit than harm to the patient. And it is always the responsibility of the hospital to ensure that the equipment is properly maintained and all the safety instructions are laid out, and then protective measures are also in place. A system of reporting and remedial measures should always be in a place whenever the recommended limit is reached by a person. And special operating procedures should be there for high-risk patients like pediatric cases and in case of pregnant workers. Safety, coming to diagnostic procedures, safety in diagnostic procedures and safety in interventional procedures, how to be safe from the radiation exposure. So in diagnostic procedures, always whenever there is an option, go for a non-ionizing radiation medium like an ultrasound or an MRI is preferred whenever possible. And taking routine X-rays like skull X-ray or chest X-ray after an admission is to be avoided. And CT, as we all know, multi-director CT has taken over the older CTs, but still it has more radiation exposure, around 10 to 30% more radiation exposure. So less essential cases, then we can go for a low dose examination, a partial rotation, and such. The principles can be changed while doing a CT scan. And then coming to EVAR, usually when doing a EVAR, a major procedure which involves endovascular help, then there is more chance of radiation exposure. So in that, various principles like automated tube current modulation, there is a fixed current intensity to the particular segment can be automated so that it avoids unnecessary too much exposure during a EVAR. And also these patients, when they come up for follow-up, we have to follow them up with repeated CT angios. This can be avoided by use of a contrast enhanced ultrasound because they say that solid organ malignancies is seen more commonly following EVAR when these patients come up for follow-up following the radiation exposure. Other recent modalities like 3D rotational angio, dynamic CT, which use in pre-op planning, emergencies, and for detection of endo leaks, they have less radiation exposure than a standard CT. And sometimes we also know that high-risk organs are getting exposed unnecessarily if they are not the actual targets of examination. Like during a CT of head and thorax, lens, thyroid, and breast can get exposed. In a CT of pelvis, your gonads can get exposed. So this has to be avoided. So efforts has to be made to shield the radiosensitive organs whenever they are not actual in the field of examination. Coming to the safety measures in the interventional therapy, radiation exposure for just brief points in general. Radiation exposure for operator, it is around 0.05 millisieverts. Hands are at more risk. 1 minute of exposure of hand, it gives around 20 millisieverts of skin dose. And erythema can occur when the dose reaches more than 2 sieverts. And the high doses to eyes can result in cataract formation, and especially posterior subcapsular cataract. And since most patients are old age, deterministic effects are more common than the stochastic effect. As I told earlier, a minute of fluoroscopic time in the cath lab is around 200 to 400 chest X-rays radiation dose. So how to prevent it? The first one is the emission control. That is voltage of the tube, keeping it in a high voltage, and current, keeping it in low current. Thereby it controls the photons, which produces lesser radiation with a good image quality. Image collimation has to be used as shown in this picture, and filters used whenever it is possible so that we can focus on our area of interest in particular and produce a clearer image also. Few of us have the practice of using magnification, but actually this magnification has 2 to 3 times more exposure of radiation than a normal image. And then whenever possible, the review of the last image has to be done instead of taking additional fluoroscopic exposures, so that radiation can be minimized, and better to keep a large image intensifier which can actually require less radiation dose than the smaller ones. The second one is time. Try to minimize as much fluoroscopic time as possible. Refrain from continuous activation of the on switch. Do short intermittent exposures whenever is required. Ideal to keep a timer so that it indicates after constant fluoroscopic time is reached, like after 5 minutes set time. And then always it is good to measure after a finished procedure to note the observed dose of the patient and also the fluoroscopic time at the end of the procedure. We also perform DSA, which is high rapid sequencing test. But they say it is almost 10 times more radiation exposure than a normal fluoroscopic shot, or it is around, and the personal dose gets almost 60% higher than a fluoroscopy. So in this, instead of going for a same frame rate, a variable frame rate, like first 6 seconds a different frame rate and then altered frame rate can be practiced while doing a DSA. Then coming on to the distance, the scatter radiation actually decreases with the square of distance from the ideal to maintain distance of the patient and table from the away from the tube, and so raising the table as high as possible and the image intensifier keeping it as close as to the patient as possible is advisable. And radiation also varies according to the angulation of the patient. Ideally, patient directed distance of less than 5 centimeters with source to image distance of less than 15 centimeters is preferred. And whenever a person is not washed up for the case, ideally avoid standing up in the fluoroscopy room. Coming next to the barriers during interventional procedures. Barriers, they are needed both for controlling patient as well as the surgeon's dosages. 3 types of barriers are there. The first one is the architectural barrier. These architectural barriers are actually built into the walls of the procedure rooms. They are nothing but transparent leaded plastic shields. It can be either stationary or mobile on flows. The second one is the equipment barriers. As you know, the highest scatter exposure is at the table level. So table side lead shields hanging from the table are useful. Sometimes ceiling mounted acrylic shields are also used, which reduce the amount of radiation exposure to the brain and to the eyes by a factor of 20. Apart from this, one important thing, the third segment, is the personal protective devices. A properly worn lead apron is essential. Usually this lead apron comes in around 0.25 millimeters thickness. It attenuates about 96% of the radiation exposure, whereas with an anterior wrap, that is coming in front until twice, it is around 0.5 millimeters thickness, almost attenuates 99%. Usually skirt configuration is preferred. And recently, weightless aprons and disposable aprons with tungsten antimony have all been increasingly used. Other thing is to use leaded eyeglasses, which has large lenses and has side shields also, which protects the eyes. And then thyroid shields is advisable. Use of protective hand gloves, which is almost 0.35 millimeter lead equivalent, is also being practiced, but not often used because they have reduced sensitivity during various procedures. Apart from these, the operator also himself should have a good knowledge about the radiation safety. He should have a plan for the and good operational skills and how to monitor this exposure. It is usually monitored by keeping a dosimeter that has to be worn at all times, one at the waist level and one at the neck level. It is a film badge-based dosimeter. It measures the dose over a period of time, and whenever the IRCP limits is reached over a period of 1 year, then temporary withdrawal from the radiation work has to be followed. And whenever we are going for a major procedure like an EVAR, we have to inform and get the proper consent of the family and patient before and explaining that there will be higher exposure of radiation. Some of the practical safety points in these patients during intervention: fluoroscopy always should be intermittent. Should not be switched on unless the operator sees the monitor. Only allow essential persons to be standing inside the room. Display ample warning signs at all entrances whenever using radiation. Regularly service and calibrate the instruments. And newer machines and fixed systems are better because they have less dosing. Image intensifier, pulse fluoroscopy can be used, and image quality can also be better. And ideal whenever possible to use a radio-opaque catheters. Many hospitals at present, they have a modern hybrid suits which has high resolution screens. They have motorized CM control and reduces radiation exposure. There is no overheating issues also. And usually they say that a dose that is observed by a vascular surgeon is less than that being received by an interventional radiologist or by a cardiologist. an extrapolated data by Ho and colleagues, they say that to reach the target annual dose limits, a vascular surgeon, he has to do at least yearly 2,500 aneurysm repairs or almost 6,500 peripheral procedures. Higher exposures, they are seen with patients with a high body mass index, complex anatomy, or when undergoing complex procedures like fenestrated graft procedures. A short note before finishing on radiation and pregnancy. It is recommended that an occupationally exposed pregnant worker, woman, she has to declare the pregnancy for purpose of reducing radiation to the child. The risk is highest during the organogenesis, that is during the first trimester, and diagnostic tests or procedures are to be avoided unless it is really necessary, and it has to be done with the informed consent. And major adverse events that can happen to the fetus are like abortion, teratogenic potential, mental retardation, or intrauterine growth retardation can occur in the fetus. So apart from this, especially when they get exposed during the 8 to 16 weeks of pregnancy with a dose of around exceeding 100 millisieverts, there can be CNS malformations, there can be reduction in the intelligence, and microcephaly can be there. And they say that even with an exposure of prenatal exposure of around 10 millisieverts at the smaller levels, there can be leukemia in children, and fetus can be affected by it. And then whenever the pregnant lady is working in a radiation environment, then the Nuclear Commission has given a guideline that not more than 5 millisieverts of equivalent dose has to be received during the entire pregnancy, and it should be always less than 0.5 millisieverts per month. So what is the general guidelines given by ICRP? They say that the department should develop a policy that the staff should all the time wear in a radiation unit 2 dosimeters, one at the apron at the waist level and other at the collar level above the lead aprons. The waist level one is one below the aprons, and the hand doses are monitored by additional ring dosimeters. Annual equivalent dose to the lens is around 150 millisieverts, and dose to the hands and feet is around 500 millisieverts. Usually for pregnant ladies, it is suggested that the dosimeter kept on the mother's abdomen is used to measure, that is kept under her protective garments. And usually the embryo's additional dosage, it should never exceed more than 1 millisieverts during the entire course of pregnancy. This is the ICRP recommendations. They're for safety limits. They say for skin and extremities, as I told earlier, for hands and feet, it is around 500 millisieverts per year is the occupational exposure allowed. And for lens, it is around 20 millisieverts per year is the radiation exposure allowed. And in case of pregnant women, as I told, around 1 millisieverts to the fetus is the maximum allowed limit for radiation safety. And what are the risks that can occur when the fetal dose is more than that? That is, if the fetal dose is more than that 1 millisieverts, there is 3% chance of probability of malformations. And with every increasing dose in fetal dose, there is higher probability of development of cancers and leukemia in these children. General recommendations have been proposed by different countries. Usually European and the US standards, they say it has to be less than 50 millisieverts per year in 1 year, the radiation exposure, and lifetime limit they usually calculate by 10 millisieverts multiplied by the patient's age in years. Usually for Germany, it is lesser, around 400 millisieverts lifetime dose, they say. This is the recommended limit. Finally, to conclude, for whenever going for an endovascular procedure, we have to get adequate training. We have to be aware of the radiation hazards and safety strategies, especially in this era, and then plan the procedures well with all the available data, especially in major procedures like EVAR, where we're going for endovascular procedure for a long time. Execute with utmost skills and wear dosimeters at all time. Keep track of individual dose levels. Minimize the fluoroscopy time. Use collimation as far as possible, and position in the low scatter area, and with use of and also to use appropriate barriers whenever possible. Thank you.